is Marisa Jacobs. I'm the Managing Director of Xpatweb, the premium immigration provider for corporates and professionals in South Africa. Today we're speaking with Mr. Phindiwe Mbhele. He's the Director of Corporate Accounts at the Department of Home Affairs. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Marisa, and thank you for having me.
Only a pleasure. We deal with Phindiwe and his team on an almost daily basis, and they're really one of the premium teams within the Department of Home Affairs, and it's such a privilege to be talking to him today. And I think more importantly, he's been the man behind the Trusted Employer Scheme over the past couple of months and really been spearheading it from a department perspective. And we really want to zoom in on the Trusted Employer Scheme today and talk to you about that. From our side, the first time we heard about the Trusted Employer Scheme was after the annual investor conference hosted by President Ramaphosa, and one of our clients was there sitting next to the president and shook his hand, and of course with the backlog that we're dealing with, he tongue-in-cheek was saying to the president he really shouldn't be in the country at the moment. He's one of those waiting for the permit. And after the conference he came and he told us about the Trusted Employer Scheme and how exciting the project is. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about how did it come about?
Okay. No, thank you very much, Marisa. And you will remember in that very same conference that you're talking about, the South African Investment Conference. I think it was around 2018, in April, when the president announced that the immigration system of South Africa would be going through an overhaul. And as part of the overhaul, or some of the activities leading up to that overhaul, was a work visa review that was done by the team in the presidency. They are known as the Operation Volunteer, where they identify blockages that are preventing us from taking advantage of the skills that are there. From other countries. So what the president announced as part of the interventions was what we now know as the Trusted Employer Scheme, where we were looking at the blockages that makes it difficult for companies to be able to recruit from abroad. And the Trusted Employer Scheme came as one of the recommendations coming from the Operation Volunteer Work Visa Review report, where they recommended that the department should consider introducing a Trusted Employer Scheme. You would remember around May 2023, we then had a series of workshops with various companies where we invited them to give us inputs. And if I remember well, yourself as Xpatweb also submitted a written submission on the 19th of May, where you were giving some inputs also based on your own research that you had done with some of the employers, to say most of the companies had identified certain areas as being, the stumbling blocks. And that submission also helped quite a lot because, as you will see, in the Trusted Employer Scheme itself, most of the recommendations or the inputs that we have or that you made, align basically with and closely with what the Trusted Employer Scheme looks like today.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. So let's fast forward now with the applications for Trusted Employer Scheme that opened late last year. Employers were given the opportunity to express their interest to be a trusted employer, and many companies submitted to say yes, they are keen to be trusted employers. I think it closed in November last year, and by January this year, we could see that the department had worked through those applications, and most employers who had made application had outcome in terms of whether they've been approved to be a trusted employer. I think from our perspective, we submitted quite a few applications on behalf of our clients. All of the outcomes we've received so far has been positive. On rough calculation, we think there's about 40 companies who expressed interest. Can you perhaps give us an indication of how many companies have been approved to be trusted employers?
Yes. No, thanks, Marisa. As you quite correctly pointed out, we published a gazette in October last year, where we now invited companies to express interest for admission to the trusted employer. And one of the things that we did very well was that we had crafted a criteria that even before applying, companies would themselves be able to know whether they would be able to qualify for the scheme or not. If you just run through the criteria, you'll see that one of the requirements was that the company should demonstrate capital investment that they had made since 2018. And it was actually two-pronged. They either had to demonstrate investments up to the value of 200 million since 2018, or at least have made a pledge at the South African Investment Conference. Because you would also remember that one of the issues that was raised, and it is always an issue that comes up at the South African Investment Conference, was that companies who had pledged would then later complain that they are struggling to get visas in order to make their pledges, work. So we had said that companies that had pledged or had demonstrated some capital investment to that value would then be able to qualify. And then in addition to that, we also had the requirement that we wanted to reward companies that are doing good, good employers. That is why the word trust, features quite distinctly there. It would be companies whose affairs are in order in terms of being registered with the SARS, being in good standing with the Department of Employment and Labor, and also companies that are registered with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Now, the process itself also required that the departments that I've mentioned should also be involved. So the Department of Trade and Industry was issuing certificates that confirmed that this particular company operates in a certain sector. As you know, the DTIC has certain priority sectors like your energy, resource-based services, and so forth. The Department of Labor also had to confirm that whatever company that was applying was in good standing in terms of QAIDA or the UIF, and that their matters were also in order. Then there was also a criteria on employment. A company that had demonstrated that they were employing South Africans and that they were driving employment. A certain percentage of South Africans, 60% or more of South Africans or permanent residents employed. And then there was also a criteria also of graduate development programs. A company that demonstrates that over and above all the investments that they are doing in the country, there's also the effort to have South Africans trained. As you would know, we have a high number of unemployed graduates, and every company that is able to take them in terms of giving them working experience, should really be commended. So taking into the account of all those criterion, the companies were able to apply. And in December 2023, the Director General, Mr. Makole, set up an interdepartmental committee that, from these departments that I have mentioned, they went through the applications. I think at that time we had around 108 applications that, we had received. But we then also had to do some reconciliation because there were actually two methods of applying. There are others that sent in emails, but the same companies also, just to be on the safe side, also dropped in physical files. So we found that others maybe would have been a double count and so forth. But so far, after the outcomes and the recommendations of the interdepartmental company, we had something like 65 or 68 companies positively admitted. and I think around 35 that did not make the cut. And the ones that did not make a cut, really, it would be that you'll find that in one area they scored more points, but they were lacking in other areas and so forth. So they really fell short of the criteria that we had published. But our position as the department on this particular scheme is that we would rather admit more than exclude. So it's not exclusionary. So what we have, and we are also seized with at the current moment, is look at whether those companies that did not make it, whether there's ways that we can try to assist them to make sure that they are able to correct those areas where they fell short. But the interest in the scheme so far has been very exciting. As the department as well, we are very excited. Just yesterday we met some other stakeholders as well. And those that have received the positive outcomes have expressed that they really can't wait because they believe that this is going to be a game changer. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can't agree more.
Yes.
Clients are extremely excited and they can't wait for it to be rolled out. So I think that takes us to our next to the next part of it is the approvals came through, indicating that there would be a memorandum of understanding shared with employers for signature, and then once that has been finalised, then we can see the actual rollout of the trusted employer scheme. How do we envisage those next steps unpacking and the process unfolding?
No, thanks, Marisa. At the current moment, we are just issuing the final outcomes. But also, as we are issuing the outcomes, we also become aware that there are some applicants whose applications will have bounced because they've sent them through an email, and now they are coming back to us and say, I had so and so got an outcome. I'm still waiting for my outcome. When we check our records, we do not have their application. And we then later discover that, it's because the documents that they had sent exceeded our own email capacity. So where there's proof that the company applied before the closing date, we are able to entertain those applications as and when we become aware of them. For companies that have received positive outcomes, like you mentioned, they will be receiving the MOUs, the Memorandum of Understanding, which is quite, straightforward and simple. We will be distributing the MOUs to the companies, and depending on their own internal processes. As soon as they've signed the MOU, the DG of the department will also sign the MOU. And once the MOU is signed by both parties, the company can start submitting. For companies that received negative responses and refusals, and as you would know, the Public Administration Justice Act requires that any negative decision, the recipient must be given an opportunity to ask for a review if they believe that it needs to be reviewed. So we've also given them an opportunity. In the letters that we've given to them, we have said that should they feel aggrieved by the decision, or maybe they be of the view that according to them they qualified to get the points, they can put those motivations back to us, and then the DG will reconsider their cases and ultimately give a final response to their review. So we expect to be giving the last of the letters this week, tomorrow being a Friday. And if everything goes well, our MOU is still with our legal services, just to make sure that everything is in place. And then as soon as it is done, we'll be distributing them either maybe from tomorrow, Friday, and then as and when they start coming in, the project will start running.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is progressing very quickly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it from a practical perspective. So you've been approved as a trusted employer, you get your MOU, it gets checked, you sign it off, and you submit it in. Now you are on board in terms of trusted employer. Has there been some finalization in terms of what that's going to look like? We had seen the presentations that you were speaking about that went up early last year, where some of those proposed changes for the trusted employer would be a shorter document burden in terms of what they would submit. They would then have to keep those documents on file personally and check them as a company. And then when the department wants to do some spot checks, let's make sure they've got those those documents on file. Is that still the thinking? Is that still what it's going to look like? And is there any more clarity around what those documents would be and what the rules around it will be?
Yeah. No, most definitely, Marisa. You remember that that was actually the aim of this scheme from the beginning. If you recall, the work visa review that was done by the Operation Intricacies team, headed by the former DG of Home Affairs himself, Mr. Mafuso Msima. There was a finding that said that in some instances, just to get a visa from Home Affairs took something like 48 weeks. Now, when we did our own assessment after we had studied the report, we found that the majority of documents that resulted in the visa process taking so long were actually documents that are outside of Home Affairs. So a person will be required to get a police clearance from the country of origin where they have been staying since the age of 18 for more than 12 months and so forth, which was quite a complicated process. You can imagine the high-flying CEOs that has worked in many different countries. He would have to go back to each of those countries to get a police clearance. So we also looked at the issue of qualifications. The applicants should also have their foreign qualifications evaluated by SAPA. That process also has its own timeline. There would also be the requirement as per the immigration regulations that says that any employer that wants to employ a foreign national, should have tested the market and satisfied us as government that they could not find a suitable South African that could perform the work. That process itself, will also take quite long. And in the work visa review, these are the issues that came up from the research. The research said that while Home Affairs might be able to finalize a visa maybe within 5 or between 5 and 20 days, the reality was that the processes leading up to that were the ones that are actually taking a lot of time. So what we have done in the trusted employer scheme is actually, reduce those requirements that those documents that you would need before you get a visa. And what we have said, we've said as government, if a corporate employer, for instance, wanted to employ a CEO, we think that the corporate employer would have more to lose if they were to employ somebody that does not have proper documents. So the risk is basically with the employer. So what now happens is that the employers in the trusted employer scheme, for some of the documents, they would give us undertaking. They give us an undertaking that the person has the right qualifications, and all of those things. So for general work visas, what the minister has done is that he's given a general waiver for all trusted employer or trusted employers. He's given them a waiver of the Department of Labor certificate because that was also indicated as one of the major issues. On the intra-company transfer, the companies that transfer executives from the mother company abroad to the one locally, there was an issue of the skills transfer plan where there was quite uncertainty to say what does it entail, what is the document for, who do you transfer skill to, and so forth. Now, we have said that the trusted employers who have qualified in the trusted employer scheme, by virtue of them having a graduate program that I mentioned earlier, they are already demonstrating that there's some skill transfer that they are doing. So, in lieu of that skills transfer plan, we now accept the graduate development program, which then means that for intra-company transfers, for companies that are on a trusted employer scheme, we will not need the skills transfer plan because we already know that they have a graduate plan, the development plan in place. For critical skills, the issue that was flagged was the issue of belonging to a professional body, which is also something that is outside of the process of Home Affairs. Most of the applicants were complaining that it takes too long to be registered by professional bodies because each professional body also has its own processes in place. So we've also taken that away, the requirement to register for a professional body, except for those occupations where by law it is required. For instance, the statutory bodies, like even your medical practitioners, we could not take that away. But for all the other ones where you are able to practice without the need of being registered, we've said, we are taking that away. And this is in addition to the other concessions that we had already given, like taking away the radiological report, reducing the police clearance requirement to only 5 years or the 5 years prior to you making the application, instead of going to back all the years where you've worked at other companies. The other thing, which is more of an internal administrative process, is what we will be doing with the applications from the trusted employer. We are working on a turnaround time which is much more shorter because from our observation, we are saying that applications were taking long because we had to verify all those documents that were outside. But now that we no longer require those documents, it means that it will even take us a lesser time to finalize an application. So it's going to really, make a difference. And I'm sure most of the companies will start to see the outcomes coming out much more quicker than they are usually used to. Thank you.
Fantastic. And then those applications will be, or those processes for trusted employers will be applicable both for those who file within South Africa for renewal application, as well as for those who are filing abroad, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
That's where the big issue sits.
No, thanks, Marisa. No, that's quite correct, because also the observation has been that with some of the interventions, the stakeholders will say to us, it works better in country, but outside of the country, it's something else.
Yes.
So the Director General will be sending a directive to all the missions abroad, where we accept their visa applications to say, for trusted employers, this is the process, this is the standard operating procedure, so that an employer who brings in an employee either in the Philippines or from Beijing or from Uganda or from Zimbabwe gets the same treatment and the same service that they would get if they were to apply inside of the country.
Fantastic. And then, my other question is around most of our clients who comes through for the employer, that the employees applying for the work visa have their accompanying spouse and their accompanying family. They will all be treated as a unit when it comes to the trusted employer scheme, I'm assuming, to get their visas.
You are quite correct. That is also one of the interventions that we've put in to say that when the employee of a trusted employer gets a visa, and they are being accompanied by a spouse or a dependent child, they will be processed at the same time. I'm sure you know of the frustration of some of the CEOs who would be in their country, but their family is still at home because their applications are delayed and so forth. So we're taking a holistic view of the applicant. If the applicant is being accompanied as a family, then we process the whole entire family at the same time.
A question that I'm getting from some of our clients is, we have a new resource that needs to come into the country. We are getting together all the documentation. We are just about ready to submit, but we don't want to submit yet. We're waiting for the Trusted Employer Scheme to roll out. Is that wise? Should they wait, or should they just submit because they will be part of the Trusted Employer Scheme, and once it's submitted, they can still leverage on the benefits of the Trusted Employer Scheme?
Thanks, Marisa. We are also receiving the same question from most of the employers, and our response basically has been that if you are really in urgent need of recruiting somebody from abroad or bringing them in, you can proceed. You do not necessarily have to wait for the signing of the MOU and so forth. The only difference would be that at the current moment, we will then not be able to get the benefit of the TES. But if your recruitment plan, still has time, to allow you to mobilize your foreign resources within the next week or so, then maybe you might want to hold off a bit. But it doesn't stop any employer from continuing with their recruitment plans. The other thing now that I remember when you asked this question is that in responding to those that were unsuccessful, we also made clear that being not admitted to the Trusted Employer Scheme does not in any way affect your recruitment processes. If you were in the middle of mobilizing foreign resources and so forth, you will still be able to do so. Not being admitted to the Trusted Employer Scheme does not amount to blacklisting. So your other processes, your applications will still be processed in any other way that we've always done. So I thought I should just make that also known, because I also get this. I get this feeling that there's anxiety amongst those that did not get a successful admission, that maybe they will not be able to recruit, but that is not the case.
I guess a big question is, we know that the department is suffering from this severe backlog of applications, and obviously some of our trusted employers who've been approved, they themselves they have applications that are part of the system and have been long pending. When they get approved as trusted employers, would they be able to leverage their status as trusted employers to raise those applications that are stuck in this backlog to the department's attention, to look at those previous applications under the old rules, but to get some attention drawn to them? Or is that, are you drawing a line and saying this is from henceforth, it will work like this, and anything part of the old system will remain part of this backlog, or is there some kind of differential?
Yeah. No, thanks, Marisa. Look, at the point where we are not or may not be aware of how many applications each trusted employer currently has pending with us. One of the approaches that we have thought maybe we'll be taking going forward is to say that once we have signed the MOU, we might then need to sit with each trusted employer to say, do you have anything that is pending in the system that requires our attention? Because our understanding is that, after being admitted as a trusted employer, we can't just say, this is where we are going to start moving forward. We will also redress whatever that is there with us that needs to, so that we have the entire experience, rather than saying, your trusted employer benefits will only apply going forward. But like you said, your applications that you submitted before then will then be dealt with in terms of the requirements that were in place at that time. And we think it will be a better approach to do it that way. Not only to say that we'll only entertain you as a trusted employer going forward, and any pending application will remain pending. We will be doing those engagement or having the engagements with each trusted employer to say, because it does not necessarily mean that every trusted employer by next week will start submitting applications. Some of them, they have longer term plans, they will recruit people in the coming years and so forth. But what we will then need to do is that being admitted as a trusted employer, let's also look at what do you have in the system and how do we then assist, because also those applications are also equally important, for these corporates.
Then I want to just take a step back in terms of the waivers that are being given to trusted employers. So it sounds like some documents will be waived in their entirety. So a applicant will, for instance, not need to register with a professional body at all. Or is it the case that they would still need to register, but that document doesn't need to be submitted to the department? Or like the SACMA requirement. Are you waiving it completely to say that you're trusting the employer to have done the due diligence to make sure that it is at the correct NQF level and it is a true certificate? Or are you saying that they must still do it, and if there is an inspection done with a trusted employee, you will want to still see proof that those checks and balances have been done?
Yeah, the whole idea is that, and going back to the issue of the documents that take too long to obtain before you get a visa, is that we want to cut that process of that takes time. But we do not necessarily get rid of the requirement that is there. So, for instance, a CEO that says that she needs to register with a professional body, but she's unable to do it now at the time of an application, she will be able to submit the application. But we would want an undertaking from the company to say that during the duration of employment, or at the time that she holds the visa, she would make an effort to apply for registration. We are not encouraging a non-registration with professional bodies. We are just saying that at the time of application, it is fine, so that it does not take much of your time getting those documents. We will accept the application without, but the expectation would be that 5-year visa that we would have given to you would have given you enough time, to obtain the necessary documents.
Then, so if we take that then forward to say that at some point there will be some kind of check by the department, is there a plan for the inspectorate to form part of the process and visit those trusted employers to check that that the system isn't being abused? And to give the department that comfort that the system is working as it's supposed to?
Yes. There is going to be what we call monitoring and evaluation, and inspections as well, interdepartmental inspections from the DTIC, the Department of Employment and Labor, and our own central law enforcement, which is inspectorate in the immigration branch. Because in as much as we base, or we'll be basing our relationship on trust, that we trust that the employer will do the right thing, the employer will bring the right people, will bring in the right skills. But we cannot, as a department, also abdicate our responsibility in making sure that really is the skills that are needed. Otherwise, if we do not do that function, there's a possibility of abuse, as you say, where people might bring in semi-skilled or low-skilled people, or on the basis that they are a trusted employer. So for every application that we receive, especially from the missions, because that is where most of the applications start, we would want to know the occupation that they brought, the people who brought in and so forth. And where we are able to, to identify a trend that this particular employer is just using the status, to recruit people that are not even skilled or not even qualified and so forth. Our MOU does say that we may terminate that employer's status, and which was one of the strongest recommendations from the Operation Vulindlela team. I mean, they even went as far as saying that we might even blacklist such companies. I'm not sure what is in the MOU now, but in terms of our own Immigration Act, there are certain penalties for employers who misrepresent themselves. So there will be inspections, but as you know, we will not be overbearing, be inspecting an employer every week. But when there is a need or where we identify a trend that makes us uncomfortable, we will be able to do that. We might also be visiting employers just to get a feel of how the system has been in terms of supporting their recruitment processes, and also use this period to get feedback from them. What works, what doesn't work, what was the experience abroad? Is there any particular mission of the department that is not giving the service that we've promised and so forth? And that feedback will actually assist us in making or seeing whether the scheme is working properly like it's supposed to. Yeah.
So, you've spoken about waivers for intercompany transfer, general work visa, critical skills visas, which obviously those are the three main work visa categories under which employers are bringing their talent into the country. Is there any consideration for employers whose employees are progressing to permanent residency?
Well, we have not looked at permanent residency at the current moment. And the reason for this is that, as you would know, we are also having an overhaul of our immigration legislation. And when we came to the issue of permanent resident, we saw that there are some of the issues that would fall in what the current white paper is dealing with. And we said, let us not overextend ourselves. Let us first look at, the work visas, the priority visas and so forth. And then we'll deal with permanent residency when the time allows. But what we have done as far as permanent residence is concerned, is that we've also committed to ensure that permanent resident applications from employees of TES are also processed expeditiously. So, because that is another sore point, you would know of executives who, after having worked here for a while, would want to buy property, would want to, and so forth. And it can be quite difficult if you do not have permanent residence. We have other executives, they come and work in South Africa, they fall in love with the country, they want to be permanent residents. And you also find others who, in the course of time, becomes financially independent. Others want to retire in South Africa and so forth. So we would want to support such employees. But in as far as the required documents, and take into consideration that permanent resident in most cases eventually leads to citizenship, we would really want to make sure that the person has all the documents that we would require.
Yeah, correct. Good. I think in the closing part of our discussion today, perhaps we can just talk about this first wave of applications have now come through, and you've approved your select trusted employers. The initial presentation spoke about a 100-day pilot phase in which you will test it, and then after that 100 days, you would decide whether you would open up for additional employers. How has that evolved since it's been opened up now? Are you already considering opening for a second wave of employers, or where is the department at in terms of allowing more in?
Yeah. We have received such requests. As it is always the case, some of the employers would have said that they were not aware of the scheme, We have employers who in the beginning were a bit skeptical and they didn't want, especially if somebody has a pending visa for quite some time, they'll say, I don't think this would help me in any case. And then we have other new players, the companies that have just been set up and they say, we want to belong to this. And those are the requests that we have received to say, when are you opening again for us to be able to apply? And our response at the current moment is that because we haven't even tested the efficacy of the scheme, we don't want to bite more than we can chew. We are thinking, let us see how well do we service the current trusted employers. And if we do it very well, we might decide to say, let us open for another round of applications. The Director General is quite keen on it. The type of companies that have come to express interest after the closing date, are quite good companies that, reputable companies that just missed the deadline, or they thought maybe it's not something that they would need at the current moment. But the consideration for the next round of application is there. And once the department decides on that, I think the invitation will go out similar to how we did with this first one.
Excellent news. Thank you so much for the discussion. I think we are all somewhat wiser in terms of the Trusted Employer Scheme and what it promises to bring. And we're really excited to work with you and your team on this project. Are you, if I may ask, are you going to be heading up this Trusted Employer Scheme in the months to come? Or you remain on the forefront? And that's positive news. We've only had very positive interactions with your team, and we're excited to work with you as we work on this as well.
Yeah. No, thanks, Marisa. The Trusted Employer Scheme, is an evolution of what you've always known as the corporate account scheme, where our main focus is facilitating investment by assisting companies to bring in critically skilled people. And our mandate is not only to attract skills, but also to retain critically skilled people in the country. So the Trusted Employer Scheme falls within the Directorate Corporate Account, and that is where it will be administrated from. We'll also be supporting the missions in terms of any questions of clarity that they may want to know, confirmation, because some of the missions would want to confirm that is this person really a trusted employer, or they granted a status and so forth. So those are the administrative functions that we'll be doing from from corporate accounts. And obviously, as the head of corporate accounts, I will also be heading up the Trusted Employer Scheme, and it's just an additional function of the department, but it for us as well, it's something that is very exciting. We also have Mr. Mbhele would also be managing all these accounts of this trusted employer. So any issues is the one that will be resolving any blockages that might occur in the missions and so forth. So we are quite excited.
Stunning. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can I